Hello, friends, and welcome to Aydt Picks. This is going to be the last version of Aydt Picks for 2025. What does that mean? There will be more, but past the new year, because there's no way of telling realistically whether my picks are going to be accurate for the Final Four. So due to that room for error and the fact that my picks have sucked so far, let's just be real. I'll go into that in a minute. Yes, there will be one more show for the duration of the season. And one or two, actually, depending on if I get... Yeah, there's probably going to be two more. One for the final game as well. So... but they'll be shorter. Before I begin this episode, always remember, but first, coffee. All right. So, I don't know how many of you are actually up this late. I had a busy day getting things ready for Christmas, so I apologize at coming at you this late. But for this one will actually be 5 minutes because it's about a certain character, the real Saint Nick. Most of my viewers celebrate Christmas, and as they were growing up, I'm sure y'all have celebrated Santa Claus. So the Santa Claus that we know was based off of a man who existed called Saint Nicholas of Myra. Existed in the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, and he was a Christian bishop in modern day Turkey. He was born in 270 and died in 343. He was known after his for giving charity to children and those less than fortunate, those in need, as his Christian faith demanded. Or at least try to take care of others, be kind to others, give what you need to the poor. And that's what he did. His parents were apparently pretty wealthy, came from a well-off family. When they died, he gave to the poor. He loved children, and he helped get them out of poverty. But one of the most infamous things that's attributed to St. Nicholas was at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when he smacked the heretic Arius, who believed that the Father and the Son were separate divine beings instead of in the Trinity with the Holy Spirit. So St. Nicholas, some historians say he didn't, but legend has it that he did. He smacked Arius, and at that point, he was jailed by Constantine's men for a little bit, but then he got out. Interesting fact, before the Council of Nicaea and Constantine took over as Roman Emperor in 305 AD, he was one of the last Christian leaders to be persecuted by the Emperor of Diocletian. It wasn't until the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, where Constantine's Edict of Milan, or Edict of Toleration, halted the persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire. And it wasn't until Theodosius in 381 AD that Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. Interesting fact, that's my history in 5. And I'm pretty sure this time it was less than 5. Some of you know that I can go on and on and on, especially if it's a topic I'm interested in. So, my picks were awful. They, the first round of the playoff, I think the only one I got right. I predicted Tulane to beat Ole Miss. That didn't happen. I predicted Alabama to get beat by Oklahoma. That didn't happen. And I predicted Texas A&M over Miami in the last minutes of the game. That didn't happen. The U lives another day and gets to avenge the 2002 national championship game against Ohio State. At least they can try. I did, however, predict almond joys are great, by the way. My favorite candy. I did predict Oregon over Old Dominion. Though Old Dominion didn't go down without a fight, man. They actually were back in the game there for a little bit at the end, like within 3 touchdowns. They kind of made it a little bit of a game, but Oregon ended up pulling off the Dogs, so that's why Old Dominion was let back in. And then my bowl pick stunk too, like for the non-first round playoff. I think I've only gotten 2 or 3 right so far, so. But I imagine they'll improve because some of these teams, like from the crappy conferences, let's face it, we don't know too much about them unless you watch more college football than I do, and that includes the smaller like Sun Belt and American Athletic conferences. But I'm going to kick it off with a bowl that starts tomorrow. The famous Idaho Potato Bowl. I believe this game is at Boise State's field, if I'm not mistaken. It used to be called the Humanitarian Bowl, but now it's the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. So it'll be Washington State versus Utah State on the blue turf. I've got Washington State over Utah State by a score of 35-28. For my next pick, we're going to Bush's Boca Raton Bowl in Boca Raton, Florida. This matchup will feature Louisville versus Toledo. I've watched Louisville this year quite a few times. They've got a great coach. In fact, he was one of the candidates that I wouldn't have minded seeing at Florida, Jeff Brom. However, that's his alum, so I can't blame him for wanting to stay at his alum. But Louisville is a good team. They beat Miami this year, and they put up some points on offense. And Louisville, I think the thing about Louisville too is they always have some good athletes, like from the state of Florida. They recruit South Florida pretty well. They'll take some 2, 3, and 4 stars who couldn't get into the bigger schools or for whatever reason weren't as highly recruited. Lamar Jackson being an example of that. Like Lamar Jackson wanted to go to Florida when Will Muschamp was here, but Will Muschamp whiffed on him for some reason. That and Derrick Henry. So Muschamp really screwed up on 2 of the NFL's greatest players. But that's neither here nor there. I got Louisville over Toledo by the score of 42-10. For the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl. Like I said, there's way too many bowls. But it is the modern era of college football, so it is what it is. In this matchup, we've got Dan Mullen's team, the UNLV Rebels, playing the Ohio Bobcats. I've got the Running Rebels of UNLV over Ohio by the score of 45-42. Doesn't look like there's going to be much defense played in this game. For the New Orleans Bowl, also on Tuesday, I've got Western Kentucky playing Southern Miss. And I've got Western Kentucky over Southern Miss by the score of 34-21. Wednesday will be the Sheraton Hawaii Bowl. I've got California Berkeley over the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors by the score of 41-27. Timmy Chang used to be a quarterback at Hawaii. Now he's their head coach. He's done an outstanding job there building up his alumni. I used to watch him, man. That dude would sling the ball all over the yard when June Jones was the coach there. Colt Brennan was the quarterback after Timmy Chang. Unfortunately, he passed, but he ended up being a Heisman candidate because of that offense that they had there. But yeah, I think Hawaii comes up a little short despite a great season. On Friday, which is the day after Christmas, December 26th, we've got the Game Above Sports Bowl. We've got Northwestern playing Central Michigan. I'm going to take Northwestern by a score of 31-6. For the Aydt Bowl, New Mexico plays Minnesota. New Mexico is 9-3. Minnesota is like 6-6. I've got New Mexico over Minnesota by the score of 34-31. For the Serve Pro First Responder Bowl, I've got Florida International over the University of Texas San Antonio by the score of 27-24. On Saturday, the 27th, we got the Go Bowling Military Bowl. Man, these bowl games are freaking... I don't know where they come up with these names, but I mean, a lot of them is probably for just the sponsor. But in this game, we got Pittsburgh in East Carolina. Pittsburgh's got a good offense. I've watched them a few times. Their coordinator is the son of Florida Gators great Kerwin Bell. Cade Bell is their coordinator. Learned from his dad. They've been at multiple places around the country. And so I think Pittsburgh beats East Carolina by a score of 38-14. The Bad Boy Movers Pinstripe Bowl. Man, that's a mouthful. But I've got Clemson playing Penn State in that game. I think Clemson and Dabo have kind of hit their stride this year. They're doing pretty well, especially compared to expectations and where they were at the beginning of the year. Still not expectations in terms of where Clemson fans think they should be. However, Dabo's done a pretty good job at cleaning up the season from where it was. I think they started out like 2-4 or something, and he's won most of his last 6. I've got Clemson over Penn State by a score of 27-13. For the Wasabi Fenway Bowl, I think this is in Fenway Park. up at the Green Monster. But I've got UConn versus Army. And I've got UConn over Army by the score of 28-21. For the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Yeah, no kidding. This isn't a typo. There's a legit Pop-Tarts Bowl. And I've got number 22 Georgia Tech playing number 12 BYU. So we're starting to get to the games where the outliers are, the ones that didn't make the 12-team playoff. Yeah, we're starting to get to these bowl games, the consolation bowls. So I've got Georgia Tech upsetting BYU by a score of 38-35. For the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl. I kid you not, you can't make some of these bowl games up. But I got Fresno State versus Miami of Ohio. And I'll pick Fresno State over Miami of Ohio by the score of 24-17. For the Aydt, New Mexico Bowl, I've got number 25, North Texas, playing San Diego State. I've got North Texas over San Diego State by the score of 32-28. For the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, Florida, I've got Missouri playing Virginia. And I think Missouri, with their experience playing in a tougher conference, and that being the SEC, I'll put them over Virginia, who plays in the ACC, whose conference has been gradually weakened over the past several years, with Florida State being bad and then Clemson not being what they were. I'm going to pick Missouri in the upset in this game. And I have Missouri over Virginia by the score of 34-24. For the Kinder's Texas Bowl, I've got LSU versus Houston. In a similar fashion as the last one, I'm going to say that because of the SEC experience, LSU will show Houston that the SEC has much better athletes and talent, and they will dominate Houston by a score of 34-10. Going to Monday, December 29th, I've got in the J-Lab Birmingham Bowl. Man, it's sad. I'm just going to talk about this for a second because the poor sponsors in this bowl, they couldn't get a team to come in and play Georgia Southern. Like, Appalachian State is 5-7. They're in a group of 5 conference. It's just sad that some of the teams they asked, like Florida State, Notre Dame, and there were a few others who refused to be in this bowl. That's the sad state of modern college football, man. It's like you're sore losers if you don't. Bowl games used to be a reward for a good season, and it would be a great way to send your seniors off. But now you have so many teams like refusing to be in this game that they had to choose a group of 5 team with a losing record. It's almost like get rid of the bowl games altogether and just focus on the playoff. That's where we're at. Not that I'd be in favor of that, but it's almost become an embarrassment Um, they had to find somebody to play Georgia Southern. That was on the cusp. I mean, Florida State got beat by Florida, and they refused to play in this game. They were invited, but they refused to go. That's a shame the way college football's become. But it is what it is, and there's not much I can do about it or anybody else. So I got Georgia Southern playing Appalachian State, and they'll beat them by the score of 31-7. On Tuesday, 30 December, we've got the Radiance Technologies Independence Bowl in Shreveport. So this is essentially a home game for Louisiana Tech. They play Coastal Carolina. I've got La Tech over Coastal Carolina by the score of 48-31. For the Liberty Mutual Music City Bowl, I believe that's in Nashville in the Titans Stadium. So that's essentially a home game for Tennessee as well. They're playing Illinois in this game. I know many Tennessee fans are disappointed that this year didn't go as well as they had hoped. But he still made a bowl game, and Heupel's still a good coach. He beat your rival Florida 2 years in a row, which hadn't happened since 2003 and 2004. So that's a positive for Tennessee. And I predict you'll beat Brent Bielema and Illinois by the score of 34-14. For the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio, got number 16 USC versus TCU. I've got USC over TCU by the score of 44-24. For the ReliaQuest Bowl, this game features number 14 Vanderbilt versus number 23 Iowa. I was rooting for Vanderbilt for most of the year, but I tell you what turned me off to them was Diego Pavia's antics at the Heisman. Man, that guy's a punk. Why can't you be grateful for, even though you came in second place, why can't you be grateful for the dude, Fernando Mendoza, who finished in front of you? You don't got to go all arrogant, and show some humility, man. That's why Reese Davis was saying he regretted voting for you. Yes, you're a great player, but, the word great also, there's other characteristics to that word. Also in that scope, what makes somebody great also, I believe, is they've got to be able to exercise some humility at some point. And Diego Pavia went off like a spoiled 9-year-old kid. And that left a bad taste in my mouth. As a matter of fact, if I was somebody drafting him, I would take that into consideration. I wouldn't want a punk like that on my team who can't be humble. But I think he's still a good player. And I think Vanderbilt will destroy Iowa by a score of 52-17. For the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, I've got Arizona State and Duke, the ACC champion. This one was hard for me to pick because you don't know which team you're going to get out of Duke, which version of Duke you'll get. And Arizona State, I haven't really watched them much this year, but I know that they are well coached and they usually have a really good offense. Kenny Dillingham's team, I believe, will beat Duke in overtime because Duke misses an extra point. I'm going to say Arizona State 34, Duke 33. For the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, got number 13 Texas versus number 18 Michigan. I've got Texas and Arch Manning, who didn't live up to his hype at the beginning of the year, but he came on strong towards the end of the year. And let's face it, the only reason that Texas isn't in the playoff right now is because of my Florida Gators, who kept you out. And so Michigan, they're kind of reeling because they lost their head coach. I believe they're still looking for another head coach. With all those distractions, I think Texas wins in pretty handily. I'm going to say they blow out Michigan by a score of 33-14. Fast forward to Friday, January 2nd. Got the Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl. This bowl features Texas State versus Rice. Boring. I don't know. It's college football. If I'm able to, I'll still watch it. But I got Texas State over Rice by a score of 24-21. For the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, I've got Navy over Cincinnati by a score of 43-16. I forgot one on December 31st, Wednesday, so it'll be the SRS distribution, the Las Vegas Bowl. I've got number 15 Utah playing Nebraska. I've got Utah over Nebraska by a score of 36-20. For the Trust Will Holiday Bowl, used to be called the Culligan Holiday Bowl. And this game used to be on Christmas Day, believe it or not. But I've got number 17 Arizona playing SMU. Gotta watch out for SMU and Rhett Lashley, man. Those dudes will take down some of the big boys. They took down Miami earlier this year. But I think they'll also take down Arizona in this bowl game. I've got SMU over Arizona by the score of 35-27. For the Duke's Mayo Bowl, Mississippi State plays Wake Forest. I've seen Wake Forest a few times this year, and man, even though they're 8-4, they're not really that good. Florida State beat them like 34-7, and we all saw how bad Florida State was. They play Mississippi State, who conversely, their bad record, Mississippi State is 5-7, but that doesn't give them any justice because Mississippi State had several one-score games this year, which they just came up short. I think the only team that they really got blown out by was Ole Miss, and I want to say they beat. That was really the only game they got blown out by, but they ended up being on the losing end of a lot of other games, like close. So I think Mississippi State wins over Wake Forest by the score of 35-23. For the FCS championship, my dad has a house in Bozeman, Montana. So he's pulling for Montana State. They play Illinois State. I think Montana State beats Illinois State by a score of 45-22. I kid you not, man. The FCS playoff is almost exciting as the Division I playoff. That leads me into the transition, my playoff picks. And this is why I say there has to be another Aydt picks. Because even if I get this right, there's still a Final Four. And then there's the championship games. So for the Rose Bowl on January 1st, got number 9, Alabama. Roll Tide. Playing Indiana, who, to everybody's chagrin, is the surprise team this year, beyond expectations. It's just amazing how good of a job Kirk Cignetti's done there. Surprisingly, even though the other schools are poaching him, he's not going to leave there. Like, he wants to be there. Usually a school like Indiana is a school where teams will poach you and the bigger schools will offer more money and they'll steal your coach. Like Florida and Penn State were looking at him too. And they still couldn't poach him from Indiana. He signed a contract to be there. So Kirk Cignetti is building something special there. But I think they'll run into an SEC buzzsaw. And Bama will hand Indiana their first loss of this year in an upset in round 2. Bama survives on. I've got number 9, Alabama, over number 1, Indiana, by the score of 34-27. For the Cotton Bowl, which is actually on December 31st, I've got the U playing Ohio State. So this is one of the most controversial calls in college football history. Those of you who have seen replay or actually remember the 2002 national championship game when Miami was going for a repeat because they had won the 2001 national championship and they were still a strong team. It was 4th down, and it was the last play of the game. And Ohio State's quarterback throws it to the receiver, and he drops it, and game over. And all the coaches and the players were already out on the field. But then they stop it, and because there was a late flag that flew in. Mysterious flag. A lot of Canes fans to this day call it BS. But it ended up being pass interference. Ohio State scored the next play to send it into overtime. They scored on the untimed down, and they ended up beating Miami in overtime. Miami thought they had a two-peat national championship, but Ohio State denied them. You better believe the U wants to get revenge. I think that they will go into the Cotton Bowl and punch Ohio State in the mouth. And they'll beat Ohio State by a score of 31-24. This is probably the final that I'm most excited to watch, to be honest with you. Or the second round that I'm most excited to watch. For the Sugar Bowl, we're going to have a rematch of Georgia and Ole Miss. Georgia's only loss they've already avenged versus Alabama. They beat them in the SEC championship. And now Ole Miss has a chance to do it to Georgia, to avenge their loss to Georgia. The tricky part is it's without Lane Kiffin, but that didn't seem to stop them when they smacked Tulane. However, I think Georgia is playing physically dominant and tougher and just a notch above everybody else in the country right now, maybe except for Miami and Texas Tech, who are also in the playoff second round. I think this game might be close early, but Ole Miss can't hang with the muscle and the toughness of Georgia. I think Georgia wins by the score of 35-20. Texas Tech and Oregon is the final bunch of the final 8 matchup. I've got number 4 Texas Tech playing number 5 Oregon. Texas Tech, I watched them versus BYU, and they just dominated that game, man. The oil money has bought good players, plus they're well coached. Yeah, and I think they, besides the one loss that they had earlier this year, which their quarterback was hurt, they've beaten everybody by a margin of 20 points or more, which is impressive. They're on a mission to destroy. I think that Oregon hangs with them a little bit, but Texas Tech is built physically like Georgia and the U. So I think Texas Tech dominates Oregon by a score of 34-13. So my Final Four is going to be Alabama, Miami, Georgia, and Texas Tech. And the reason why I'm picking again is whether I'm right or wrong, there still has to be a championship game. So there's going to be at least 2 more, or at least 1 more Aydt picks. Potentially 2 more. We'll see. Whatever you celebrate, happy holidays. Merry Christmas for us Christians out there. And I hope you enjoy the time with your family and all of the bowl games. And have safe travels out there wherever you're going. Aydt signing off. God bless.